Good evening, everybody. Brian Neubert here from goldandblack.com, live in New Jersey, home of the Big Ten's worst infrastructure, as well as the Big Ten's most improved basketball team. That being 25th ranked Rutgers, a winner tonight, 70-63 over Purdue, as you well know, considering most of you, I'm sure, watched the game. On paper, you have the 25th ranked team in the country, undefeated at home, versus a team that has been sort of the very definition of average, and every other game sort of performance level from Purdue. On paper, Purdue obviously being winless on the road in the Big Ten. On paper, the outcome is not a surprise. The path to that outcome also, unfortunately for Purdue, not a surprise, because you have seen this movie a few times already this season where Purdue gets off to a lousy start, gets behind by double digits early on the road, where more often than not, when you do that, you're going to get blown out. Not just lose, but get blown out. Purdue, at some point in time, somewhere along the lines between tip-off and the final buzzer, finds itself, makes a rally. The rally ultimately falls just short, and Purdue loses. The game where if they had just started off better, who knows what would have happened. Who knows what Purdue's season would look like right now if Purdue could just start these games better. Those first 10 minutes, those first 5 to 10 minutes, what they have meant to Purdue's season has been extraordinary, because this was Nebraska, this was to a lesser extent Michigan, this was Maryland. If Purdue just takes care of the ball, stays out of transition defense, and as I wrote in our breakdown, Purdue is a very good defensive team, but no one is good on defense when they're chasing people instead of guarding them, and that's been the story of Purdue's road failures in large part this season. Nebraska, for sure, the first 10 minutes of that game, Nebraska got Purdue in transition. Maryland, I know Maryland made a bunch of threes, but I'm sure Purdue's own failings, taking care of the basketball, whatever else, had something to do with that. Tonight, obviously, this was all about transition. Purdue's turnovers in the first half and the offense that came from them for Rutgers, essentially, when all was said and done, decided this game. It's the vicious cycle that Purdue continues to experience. Purdue continues to search for answers to. The answer seems very simple. People just say, come out with energy. Come out with energy. Okay. Purdue has energy at home. It doesn't have energy on the road. I don't think that's a problem unique in the history of college basketball to this specific college basketball team, but it is one this team needs to overcome at some point if it's going to, make something of this season, if it's going to play in the NCAA tournament, if it's going to get the sorts of wins it needs to get there. It has to figure this out. It has to just start these games better, and then once it does that, let the chips fall where they may, because right now the deck is stacked against Purdue pretty heavily, and I'm using a hell of a lot of gambling analogies in that last sentence, but it's just what came to mind. Maybe because I'm in New Jersey. I don't know. Anyway, Purdue's issues, offensively are pretty, they've been pretty much discussed, well documented, however you want to term it. Purdue's guards, Purdue has real limitations in the backcourt. This isn't a team that's, strongest with the ball. This is a team relying on a lot of sophomores, a lot of guys who aren't as good as they're going to be one day. Purdue in general lacks playmakers necessarily, lacks strength, assertiveness, dynamicism. Hold on. Let me try that again. The dynamic element. I was going to try to say dynamicism. That cannot possibly be a word. The dynamic element in the backcourt you'd ideally like to have. I mean, you can win without really great guards, really high-scoring guards, but as Purdue showed last season, it really helps when you have them. And it also really helps on the road when you have them. When offense is hard to come by, having somebody who can create a shot for themselves, people will ask, well, how did the roster get here? Who screwed up to where Purdue's, got limitations in the backcourt? Well, if Carson Edwards stays 4 years, or Purdue keeps Carson Edwards for 4 years, or Ryan Klein redshirts, you're all set, because you've got one of those two guys. But when a player leaves early, that's good for the program. That's ultimately what everybody wants. Ryan Klein, we can, obviously discuss that if you want, but I don't think that's the key to Purdue's season, that Ryan Klein 4 years ago redshirted. I'm just saying that's why Purdue is where it is right now, relying on sophomores who might not be the players right now that they're going to be one day, who obviously don't have the experience in these situations that they, will have in 2 years. probably. But that's where Purdue is right now. It's limited in the backcourt. It's not terribly strong with the ball. Good players, not guys who are alphas in alpha situations, so to speak. And playing on the road against a really good defensive team in front of a sellout crowd, that's when you need to be strongest with the ball. And when you look at what happened to Purdue in the first half, that's when Purdue wasn't strong with the ball when it needed to be strong with the ball. That was the singular difference in this game. Nevertheless, the vicious cycle part of it is you fall behind early, you make the comeback, right? You make the comeback. Why did Purdue make a comeback? Because of Jihad Proctor. As soon as I get done talking about how Purdue lacks playmakers in its backcourt, Jihad Proctor goes and does this. This guy has scored 19 points in the last 7 games after he was Purdue's leading scorer through the non-conference season. He was brilliant. I mean, he was outstanding. And this is another reminder, just like the Evan Boudreaux thing the other night, that you don't write guys off just because they're not playing. He who is most ready when his opportunity comes again can and will thrive. And that is exactly what Jihad Proctor did tonight. 19 points, only part of the story. He made some really, really good passes. He really, really helped Purdue as a passer. Live, it looked like he held his own from a defensive perspective, not been his strength. But he made a really interesting comment after the game during our interview session where he said that when he was first benched or taken out of the starting lineup, there was a difference. He looked at it immediately about being about himself. And then part of what made tonight possible was him looking at it that the team is bigger than himself. And it was just a really interesting comment. Go watch the video. I can't do it justice, and I'll probably misquote him here live because I'm just basically talking out of whatever. Proctor was brilliant tonight after he'd really fallen out of the playing rotation to a certain extent, at least relative to what he was doing earlier in the season. You know, cannot say enough positive things about what Jihad Proctor did tonight. But part of Purdue's road struggles, too, is simply when that opportunity comes to make that big shot that might be the difference between winning and losing. Either that shot doesn't go, like tonight when Purdue had a couple of really good looks from 3 within the last 5 minutes of this game. Proctor had one. Isaiah Thompson had at least one. Aaron Wheeler's 3 at Michigan. You know, I don't want to make too much of one shot, but Aaron Wheeler's 3 at Michigan goes in instead of goes 75% of the way in then out. Purdue might win that game, and maybe that's last year's Wisconsin game. Maybe then Purdue wins at I think winning at Maryland still would be a lot to ask, but they start better at Maryland maybe. Maybe they start better tonight. Maybe they win one of those two. You never know. But Purdue just, when that situation comes to make that big shot, that is the difference between winning and losing on the road so often, it just feels like Purdue's had that opportunity and Purdue just hasn't had, either the ability or the ability in the moment specifically to make that play. Purdue got a lot of wide open looks from 3 in this game, especially in crunch time. Couldn't make them. Purdue was 6 of 22 from 3-point range. That is, again, the vicious cycle. That's a part of this toxic formula that Purdue has been privy to this season on the road in Big Ten play, where it's the same things over and over again. The same start, the same middle, the same end, the same components to all of the above, and it's just a cycle they have to break. I think the way you break the shooting cycle is you don't sit here and expect, things to turn around. You're not going to suddenly start shooting 40% on the road when you've been shooting 18 to 20% all season. Whatever it is, 25%. Purdue's got to get garbage points. They got to get points off turnovers. They got to get points off offensive rebounds. Tonight, again, the opposite, where it was Rutgers who was able to take Purdue's mistakes and turn them into offense. And had Rutgers had to earn all of its points in half-court offense against a very good half-court defensive team, Purdue would have been a much better spot when it was all said and done than they were. But, all this being said, again, you do have to give Purdue a little bit of credit for being close. I know it gets tiresome to see the same story play out over and over again, but Purdue is making it a story. And that's kind of the double-edged sword of all this, is that Purdue just doesn't have quite enough to win these games. Obviously doesn't have what seems like a relatively simple, and I say that as someone who's never played the game, nor will he ever, solution to this, is just to come out with energy early. But Purdue is not feeling sorry for itself, other than the Illinois game, where Purdue clearly resigned itself early to getting its you-know-what kick. Purdue is putting up a fight, and that's admirable. It is unfortunate that that fight's not being rewarded. You do worry about at what point in time, how often does this have to happen before the fight, gets numbed or gets dulled. You don't know, but people are looking at me funny, as they should be. But Purdue is fighting, and that is a positive thing. And if Purdue keeps fighting, maybe you get one of these games sooner or later. You should beat Northwestern no matter what. If Purdue's down 10 points by the second media timeout at Northwestern, Purdue's got a real problem. If Purdue loses to Northwestern, Purdue doesn't deserve to go to the NCAA tournament anyway. I know that's a blazing take, but I think that most of you would agree with me that if you can't win at Northwestern with your season on the line, essentially, in terms of the NCAA tournament, that's, there's something fundamentally flawed with this team that probably would preclude it from going on to make the NCAA tournament anyway. So that's a big one for Purdue. Have to have it. I know it seems dicey to say any road win for this team is a must-win. It seemed like you're setting them up for failure. I just think Northwestern is so limited that Purdue should win that game. I'm not telling you anything you don't know here already, but this vicious cycle has to stop for Purdue to get the sorts of wins it needs to get, and Northwestern is a golden opportunity to do that. Purdue has to come out with energy, has to come out with focus, has to take care of the basketball, whatever it may be. Purdue has to do it starting this weekend in Evanston, has to get that game. If you get that game, is that the game that turns things around on the road? No, because the teams you'll play thereafter are going to be much different. The environment's going to be much different. Nevertheless, you have to have that game. Rutgers is good. Rutgers is really good. They're unbeaten here for a reason. This place is a difficult place to play suddenly, which is a remarkable turnaround from where this was 4 years ago. This one is an acceptable loss. The path to the loss is a little bit confounding for Purdue, but this is an acceptable loss. This is, again, a good Rutgers team. Again, unbeaten at home versus winless on the road. This is what's supposed to happen. Conventional logic tells us. Purdue's just got to break the cycle. That's just the biggest takeaway from all of this. And it's not a new takeaway. It's been a takeaway after 3 or 4 games just like it. So that's what I got. Flight out tomorrow. So I will try to get the review up during the day. I can't make any promises. I know you're dying for such things after Purdue loses. But I'm going to continue on. So it's all Purdue can do as well. So from my native habitat of New Jersey, my natural habitat, this is Brian Neubert from goldenblack.com, live from the Rutgers Athletic Center here in Piscataway, New Jersey, on my way to Newark Airport tomorrow to fly back home. Thank you for watching. Thank you for reading. Thank you for listening. Thank you for processing our materials. However it is you process our materials. And we will talk to you again late, unnecessarily late Saturday night, I believe, from Northwestern. Why they're playing this game at 9 o'clock at night on a weekend, no idea. Brutal. Anyway, thanks everybody.